Okay, recording.
All right, we're going to wait another minute. We do have a quorum of 5, but since there's 3 more people who could be joining us from the committee, we'll continue to hang on for a minute. And we've already heard that Ian is not going to be with us today, correct, Vince? Yeah.
So just so the people are aware, and me apologizing in advance, I have to come home to do these CAC meetings, and my little girl has decided that she wants singing lessons even though she's only 2. So I can only apologize in advance.
Be careful though, Vince. If we start understanding her, we're going to make her a member of the committee.
Honorary.
Yeah.
Hi, Gary.
Morning.
Okay, so Matt and Peter are the only 2 that we are aware have not joined us yet. Is that right? Or am I forgetting somebody?
Yeah, that's it.
All right, I'll call the meeting to order. It's 10:02 a.m. This is the July 14th meeting of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. And I have to make the remote announcements. So this meeting is being recorded by the town of Nantucket, and it will be broadcast on the town's government TV YouTube channel after the meeting has concluded. Under Mass General Laws, Section 30A, Chapter 30A, Section 20, if anyone is planning to make an audio or video recording or transmit the meeting, they're required to notify the chair before doing so. Do we have anybody here who is making an audio or video recording of the meeting? No. Okay, thank you. So present we have Chair Mary Longacre, Secretary Fritz McClure, members Sarah Boyce, Jennifer Carberg, Graham Dervich, and Gary Beller, with Matt Fee joining us momentarily according to my screen. Good morning, Matt. And let me confirm that all of you are able to hear me and we are able to hear you. So just going across the screen, Fritz McClure, good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Sarah,
Yes.
Sarah Boyce, good morning. Sarah, you're still muted. You're just going to go ahead and pop back in.
Good morning.
Good morning. Jennifer Carber, good morning.
Good morning.
Graham Dervich, good morning.
Morning.
Gary Beller, good morning.
Good morning.
And Matt Fee, good morning to you too.
Hello.
All right, we've got everybody. I like to think the good morning's better than the eyes. Yeah. This meeting will feature public comment, but I am going to probably confine that to the agenda item for public comment rather than taking public comment through the proceeding. Okay. Just running through some of the, I'm trying to avoid the 3-page script and go through some of the highlights. Okay, staff, I need to confirm, Vince, if you're here and we can hear you.
Good morning.
Good morning. And speakers on the agenda, we have Kimberly Rose, good morning.
Good morning.
And Marty Hilton, good morning. Okay, well, I got something out of that, Marty.
Good morning.
Thank you. So, I guess trying to cut through this is not the greatest. All right, this open meeting of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee is being conducted remotely consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the Governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. This order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will allow public comment. Okay. This meeting is being recorded and all attendees are participating by video conference. Please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to share the screen of your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. A quick reminder, if you're not speaking, it is wise to mute yourself because the software will automatically switch to your screen if it detects that you are trying to speak or if there's other noise in the background. All right, I think I've done enough to get away with there. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda, and that's good. All right. So the approval of the minutes from March 3rd. Does anybody have any edits for the minutes? I know, Vince, that we had made an adjustment. I don't know if you want to put that on the screen to make sure everybody has seen that.
Can everybody see this?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
All right, and give me a second, Vince. I'm going to try and move the screens around so that when I'm looking at the camera, people see me looking at the camera, and the rest of it goes on another screen. So give me just a moment. I got to find the right combination here. It's not. It's probably not going to let me do that. All right, I'll try it this way. If we get many more people on the screen, it won't work, but good for now. Okay, Vince, go ahead with the adjustments. I think this was sent out with the adjustments. Is that right, Vince? Okay, so we'll skip the spelling and such and just go down to yes. So I changed the record of my statement regarding the Housing Advisory Committee. And was that the only substantive change, Vince?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, if no one has other edits or comments on the minutes, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
And seconded? Okay. So by roll call vote, again, I'm just going to go through the...
Mary, just a second. I'm going to stop sharing so that you can see everybody.
I can't see everybody right now, but Vince, if you want to pop up the next minutes while we're doing the roll call vote. So Fritz McClure?
Aye.
Sarah Boyce?
Aye.
Jennifer Carberg?
Aye.
Graham Durovich?
Aye.
Gary Beller?
Aye.
Matt Fee?
Aye.
And Mary Longacre, aye. The minutes of March 3rd are approved. And go ahead and screen share the June 16th minutes, please, Vince.
Bear with me.
Yep.
Here we go. Everybody see that okay?
I can see it. Okay, what did we have anything on these? Anybody just give me a quick wave if you had an edit. Vince Dudds. Yes, that's right. So the Matt did bring up RP Eddy. We are in the process of scheduling a conversation, and that is an agenda item for later today. But we did not request, and he did not confirm that he will attend our meeting. That was not the call out. So Matt, do you think it'd be accurate to say here that RP Eddy, would be available for a conversation?
Sure.
Okay, so let's make that change.
Okay, everything else beyond that was spelling. Anyone else? Sorry, Mary.
Yep. Anybody else have comments or edits to the minutes from June 16? No? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Thank you, Matt. All right, second, Sarah. And again, we'll do roll call vote. Vince, you can take those down. Fritz McClure,
Aye.
Sarah Boyce,
Aye.
Jennifer Carberg,
Aye.
Graham Durovich,
Aye.
Gary Beller,
Aye.
and Matt Fee.
Aye.
Mary Longacre, aye. So those minutes are approved. Okay, so our next agenda item is the annual election of officer positions. We're advised by the town that every committee, I guess every year at this time, should renominate and elect the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary. Our current officers, I am the chair, Mary Longacre, Peter Brace is the vice chair, and Fritz McClure is the secretary. Peter is not here, so I hope that he doesn't end up with something he doesn't want at the end of this. I'll entertain nominations for new, or for just nominations for those positions.
Nominate Mary Longacre for chair. Peter, do you want to do all together or just one?
Well, whatever we get. If we do them all together, that's fine. If we have more options, then we'll do them separately.
Okay, so it'd be basically Peter Brace for vice chair and well, I don't know if I can nominate myself.
I believe you can, Fritz.
Okay, myself as secretary.
I
Okay.
second the motion.
Those nominations.
Any further nominations? Any discussion?
You're doing a great job, Mary.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, all those in favor of that slate, we'll do a roll call vote. Fritz McClure,
Aye.
Sarah Boyce,
Aye.
Jennifer Carberg,
Aye.
Graham Durovich,
Aye.
Gary Beller,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you very much. Thank you to Peter in absentia and Fritz for nominating himself again. Okay. All right, our next agenda item is a presentation from Acclimate. We have Marty Hilton and Kimberly Rose here representing Acclimate to tell us a little bit about why their organization was founded, what its purpose is, and what its future plans are. And can I just clarify, we have other members of Acclimate who are here in the meeting but are not presenting on their behalf. And so that's Jen and Vince. Is that anybody else? Okay. All right, Marty or Kimberly, please go ahead.
So my name is Kimberly Rose. I am a recent graduate of the University of Florida with my Master's of Historic Preservation. And I am coordinator of Acclimate. And so I'm going to share my screen really quick. Marty, if you would introduce yourself while I do that.
Yeah, so I am Marty Hilton. I'm the director of the Preservation Institute in Nantucket. I have been since 2009. I think, for those of you not aware, the Preservation Institute in Nantucket was created by the University of Florida. We've been here since 1969, officially 1972, so this is the 48th consecutive year. I'm the 6th director. Before Kim walks you through, we're kind of using the website as our presentation for Acclimate. The origins of Acclimate, or the idea of this kind of public-private partnership to raise awareness and to help support various activities like the activities of this committee, around issues of climate change and sea level rise came from the Preservation Institute in Nantucket summer program last year, and Kim was one of those students. She actually even helped give the name. It was based on we did some benchmarking for similar programs in other communities, but there was a really successful one called Weather It Together in Annapolis. And that was helped created by a woman named Lisa Craig, who's a consultant in preservation with a focus on issues of sea level rise. Lisa is, she coordinated our Keeping History Above Water Nantucket workshop last year in June, and she's now currently working with the town on design and resilience guidelines. So that's a little bit of background about the origins, and Kim can walk you through what Acclimate is.
Thank you, Marty. So Acclimate, like he was talking about, was founded during the University of Florida Preservation Institute Nantucket in 2019. Our mission statement is, it is a public-private partnership. We are working with organizations on the island. We are working with the town of Nantucket to tackle the issues surrounding adaptation and mitigation of the island. And so our goals is to work with everyone, to work with our partners, to work with the community, to work with the town of Nantucket on raising awareness, addressing these issues, and adapting Nantucket so that it has a resilient and sustainable future. Our partners, we have quite a few. The Artists Association of Nantucket, Mariah Mitchell, Mass Audubon, the Conservation Foundation, the Nantucket Data Platform, Nantucket Land Bank, the Land Council, the Chamber of Commerce, Nantucket Preservation Trust. The Osceola Foundation is our convening partner. They donated the money to fund my position. Remain Nantucket, the town of Nantucket, and of course the University of Florida. We do have many events. This is our first year. It will be, Acclimate will be a year old in September. But some of the events that we have done this year is the New Whale Street mural, which is in partnership with the Artists Association. We commissioned an artist, Kevin Stanton, to do that mural, and he should be putting the finishing touches on that soon. The Mariah Mitchell Association with their Science Speaker Series. We have a few Acclimate branded speakers attending and presenting for them. The Nantucket Preservation Trust is doing their conference in September, Rescuing History, and that's looking at the adaptation of Nantucket, and we are helping with that and presenting there as well. And then this year, I am helping with the University of Florida Preservation Institute Nantucket in partnership with Remain Nantucket and the Mariah Mitchell Association on the South Washington Street Resilience and Adaptation Strategy. And here's some events. This also advertises what other our partners are doing as well, such as the Clean Water Topics on Tap series for the Nantucket Land Council, the Race for Open Space, which just finished this weekend, which I did here in Nashville, Tennessee, where I am right now. It also announces the University of Florida's virtual final presentation for the Preservation Institute in Nantucket, as well as Rescuing History, the conference, which takes place September 16th and 17th. So those are the events that are coming up. We also have launched a blog called Taking Action. And this blog talks about the potential for mitigation and adaptation. So it's breaking down those complex ideas of wet flood proofing and dry flood proofing and all of the complex policies that surround those and putting them into simple terms and images and everything in order to make sure that the concepts are understandable to everybody. But it also talks about what other places are doing, such as New Orleans with their resource center that's doing climate webinars for free, as well as a previous one was Miami's design guidelines, which were just released and are fairly well done in that it not only addresses the built environment, but also the natural environment. So it's looking at a holistic approach at climate change. A lot of our partners really love this page, which is our resources. So we have Nantucket resources, and this is looking at the Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan, Resilient Nantucket, the Keeping History of Water conferences, as well as the CRAC Committee's Coastal Resilience Library is on there as well, in order to represent the natural and built environment together and that holistic approach that Acclimate is all about. We also have national resources, which is looking at NOAA and FEMA, as well as the National Park Service. Any webinar or conferences that have happened, such as the Keeping History Above Water talk with Jeff Goodell that was last summer. The America Adapts podcast, which is a fantastic podcast, that was also at the Keeping History Above Water St. Augustine. And Historic Buildings as a Climate Response Tool, which is a webinar that was done by the Preservation Resource Center in New Orleans. And then we have examples and some of the benchmarks that I used in my own research, as well as the benchmarks that we use for Acclimate as design and adaptation guidelines that other cities have done, such as Boston, Charleston, the entire state of Florida, Miami, and Schenectady, New York. So those are those resources, and that list is ongoing and continuously building. So I never stop with research, and neither do our partners, especially as this issue comes to the forefront for many communities. And then of course we have our contact information. We also have social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and we are about to launch a podcast, hopefully in September is the plan, that will start diving into those strategies and for adaptation and mitigation and connect with stakeholders in the community, but also looking abroad at expert testimony, looking at what research is being done and everything, and just kind of talk through some of those more complex issues as we move along. But Acclimate has some pretty big ambitions in uniting the activities of the island and uniting the community, the town, and organizations, and make sure that everyone is represented, make sure that everyone has a voice, and make sure that we are communicating as well as we possibly can. So I think that's all I have. Are there any questions?
Any questions from members of the committee? No, okay. Yeah, Vince, go ahead.
Hi, Kim. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the Whale Street mural and how that's progressing.
Sure. So that started when Acclimate was originally talked about. It was in terms of a public outreach program. And it kind of developed into its own thing. And so the Artists Association approached us and said, hey, we would like to do something that shows climate change and shows the potential effect of sea level rise on the historic environment. And so out of a lot of discussion came that mural. And it's, sorry, my cat is having a crazy moment. But out of those discussions came the mural and the commissioning of Kevin Stanton, who is a Boston-based artist. And basically it's showing both the history of Nantucket with the whaling ship and the whale, but also showing the future of Nantucket with it underwater. And raising awareness of that in a way that is accessible not only to children, but also to adults, was really important for that piece of art to reach across all of the age groups and across language barriers and whatever else may stand in our way. So that was that purpose.
And will there be an interpretive sign or something there? Or?
Yes,
Okay.
we're working on it. We are coordinating with the Artists Association to make sure that all of the information is correct, as well as any other images that we put up. We are hoping to put up a, for lack of a better term, I guess a yardstick, to show basically the real levels that might be reached at that site during the NOAA intermediate high levels, and show where that would stand on that wall as well.
And who's the property owner for that wall?
I believe it's the town of Nantucket. Marty, do you remember?
Yeah, at first I just want to apologize. We lost power at Sherburne Hall downtown, so it took a while for the Wi-Fi to reboot, so I'm back. Yeah, it's my understanding that it is the town of Nantucket for the wall.
Questions? So your future plans, Kimberly, they still focus primarily around public outreach and coordination, or are there other projects that you have in mind? Or
So we do everything in partnership with the list of partners that are on our website, but we're also willing to expand and do whatever is necessary in order to help the adaptation of Nantucket. But currently right now, the need that we have felt from our partners is that kind of advocacy position. So that is what we are trying to fulfill and trying to help promote their activities. But we are, like I said, we are partnering with the University of Florida and Remain Nantucket in order to work with them on the adaptation project and resilience strategy for the South Washington Street. And we are a resource and trying to be a resource for as many organizations as possible on the island in order to help them move forward in their action initiatives.
all right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else either from Acclimate or questions for Acclimate, or we'll go on to our next agenda item if that's it. Vince, go ahead.
Is it possible for you to expand on the ideas for the South Washington Street work at the moment?
I will turn that to Marty.
Sure. Well, I know I have shared the statement and some background on the Washington Street project. So that came out of, we had our Resilient Nantucket initiative that began in 2017. We received some funding from the Community Preservation Committee to undertake digital imaging. We use laser scanning, also called LiDAR, to document historic buildings and communities. So we documented, originally we were doing the core of the historic commercial downtown, including all 5 wharves. Then working with the town, Chuck Larson, we applied for a grant from the Coastal Zone Management Program, and we expanded that work. And so we have digitally documented from Brant Point to the end of Washington Street at Francis. And we developed a process for modeling in 3 dimensions sea level rise and doing visualizations. And then we also did a cultural resource survey of that area. It was 301 buildings to be exact. And we did a very basic vulnerability assessment based on condition of buildings, building structural foundations and typologies, and using, again, all of this was done in partnership with the town, using the NOAA intermediate high projections sort of determined when the first floor of those buildings would be inundated. Coming out of that work that was presented at Keeping History Above Water, we talked about next steps, and there were quite a few things that we, whether strong, not really strong recommendations, but things that could be considered. One of them was the idea of Acclimate, and the Osceola Foundation, which was Walter Beinecke Jr.'s family, sort of stepped forward to say this is something that they would like to see happen, and they supported that. The second piece was, I felt strongly that we really begin to look at, we also suggested design guidelines, which was already underway to write a grant, and that's come to fruition. And then we're here every summer, and we usually document either a building, of buildings, or an area. So we had the idea of looking at an area of town. We had the 3 sub areas: Washington Street, the historic commercial core, and Brant Point. So the idea was to do a deeper cultural resource survey, cultural landscape survey of that area. We're not only looking at the built environment, but the natural environment. We have a built environment, natural environment, and urban environment team. We have an amazing group of advisors, including Jen and Sarah, who will also be presenting on Thursday to the participants in PEN, which is also, is only about 7 this year, and then there's 7 researchers, so it's a large team. So the idea is to just explore different strategies for that part of town, looking at the 3 temporal or time increments of 2030, 2050, and 2100, which is what the town identified, what you all identified for the coastal resilience plan. I think we are looking at still using the intermediate high, and we're still working to determine in terms of tidal flooding and storm surge. And that's something we'll come back to you on when Chuck had provided us some information. So again, the overall is what we're calling a sort of strategic framework for what could potentially happen there. And it may be that there's a number of different scenarios that we present. And we're looking really closely at 33 Washington Street, which is owned by the Mariah Mitchell Association, as actually developing a small pilot project there. So we're only in week 2 of the PIN program, but we've been doing research, kind of building up and organizing this project throughout the spring, kind of beginning in earnest in March. There was a lot of questions about whether we would even be here this summer. And when I say we, I mean me. I'm the only one representing us. Bob Miklos, who's an architect on the island, he is here as well, and he's leading our built environment team. But everyone's working remotely, at least for now. So there was big questions right up until really April, May, whether the university would allow us to be in the field. But I'm glad that we were able to make this happen. I think this project could, we're working really closely with Lisa Craig and her partner on the design resilience guidelines. So I think whatever we propose is going to reflect what they recommend. These are guidelines specific to the historic core of the historic districts. Just so you are aware though, originally as we proposed, we were going to take those guidelines, which should have already been in draft form by June, and we were to actually explore implementing those in the Washington Street area. It's all been flipped now. So I'm conversations with Lisa more or less weekly, and I think that they're going to be able to use our project to kind of explore options, if that makes sense. So we've had to kind of rethink how we collaborate with them. And I think with the coastal resilience plan, I think whatever data that we're generating and any of the recommendations we make would be there for, to be considered, whether good strategies or not. So.
All right, thank you, Marty.
Yeah.
Vince, one more, Vince.
Last one, I promise. Simple question for both of you, I suppose. What future relationship do you see between Acclimate and CRAC?
I think that, well, I want to say a couple of things. I don't know what Kim said since I was dealing with lack of power, but even though Acclimate, I want to make it really clear that even though Acclimate sort of originated was an idea that University of Florida put out there, we right now, because Kim was chosen and she's a graduate of UF, it sort of made sense just for us to kind of still be involved. I fully anticipate UF sort of pulling back and that Acclimate really becoming its own entity, or even being operated by, another nonprofit, or another organization on the islands. I just wanted to put that out there in terms of ownership. I think that personally, I would love to see Acclimate really support the activities, the work of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. And I don't know, without looking really closely at sort of like, I don't know, your bylaws or rules of organization, but I would even recommend that perhaps that Kimberly, I know we've got Jen represented and you, Vince, but it could be that Kim even become a member of the CRA or the CRAC.
Members are appointed by the town, and right now all of our terms run through June of next year. But the meetings are open to the public, and Kim, you're welcome to attend. You can sign up on the town's website to get the advance notice with the Zoom link or however we're going to be meeting. That's, anybody is welcome to do that. And I do usually feature public comment throughout the agenda so that we are able to benefit from the knowledge of those who are attending. And we appreciate the interest. So hope to see you again.
But I think with both Vince and Jennifer serving on the Acclimate, I think you coming to that group periodically with, if there is a need or a way that you think Acclimate could support your activities, I think you should definitely make sure that that group is aware and what we can do. I will say this much, if nothing else, I found Acclimate to be extremely helpful. We're all working around these issues and there's a lot of different activities. So just taking the time about every 6 weeks just to hear what's going on, and we've already found some ways to collaborate. I think it's been beneficial.
All right, thank you. Sarah, you have a question?
Actually, Matt had his hand up first. If
Easy. Like, has anyone done any looks at other downtown? Have people looked at sort of Baxter Road? That's back on the, back into consideration. Have we looked at Baxter or Sconset or other areas?
Or when you say we, are you referring to the University of Florida's Preservation Institute?
Yeah. Have you guys done any work on down yet?
So we've done digital documentation in Sconset, but in terms of really looking specifically at issues of resilience and coastal hazards, we've really sort of turned our attention to that in the last couple of years, and our focus thus far has been downtown. I think we're open, but there's a lot of work to be done in the area that we are, and I think that again, the University of Florida has always, I think one of the reasons this program has been successful is it's what's called a participatory action research sort of approach. So we don't come into the community saying we think these are what the problems are and we think this is what has to be done. I think we really have worked hard to collaborate with the community, maybe to help some instances define the problem or just to understand what the problem is. And then we sort of say what we think we can do to help. And that's how it's worked. And again, I think it's worked fairly successfully. I think Resilient Nantucket and the Keeping History Above Water, there have been a number of people who've told me that was a transformative moment, the Keeping History Above Water, just in terms of raising awareness. And I think that's a great example of the partnership between University of Florida, Nantucket Preservation Trust, the town of Nantucket, and others.
Okay, Sarah?
Yeah, so I'm the chair of the education subcommittee, just for Kim and Marty, but and my committee report is later in the agenda, but one thing that we just recently talked about at our meeting was not wanting to overlap with other organizations doing a lot of outreach. So like, when we started a year ago as the crack committee, we had a lot of educational ideas of things that needed to get out to the community, and we realized we can only work on so much at one time. So I think hearing regularly from what Acclimate is doing and some of the other groups on island would help, because we don't want to, first of all, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to waste our efforts too, because we are a volunteer committee. And obviously something like Acclimate and Remain and the groups that have maybe a little more money behind them have a lot of like beautiful design work and things that and can go places and can help us reach a broad audience. So if there's ways that we can help, the crack committee can help inform some of those educational and outreach opportunities, but then also it helps us as the education subcommittee identify areas that maybe aren't being addressed, because we do serve the entire island and the whole community. So that's just, I think it's a great way to kind of keep in touch and keep hearing from each other, so that we can, do more with like the limited time that we have. So I just want to make that plug.
Thank you, Sarah.
And Acclimate is not a closed committee. We allow anybody to, if they want to, or if we reach out to them, we've been trying to reach out to somebody to improve youth involvement. And so if anyone would like to sit on the Acclimate meetings, we have one coming up this week. We are more than happy to have you attend those meetings as well.
Great.
I also think if you think it was appropriate, again, we're really looking to you. I think how Acclimate can support the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee, if it's even quarterly reports, and whether it's a written report or, Kim joining you to talk about current plans and future plans. We're not quite, it's interesting. I think both these committees sort of came online about the same time. Our first meeting was September of 2019. The concept was put out there more like June. So, you know, we're still, it's evolving, our thinking. I don't know if Kim said we recently did a survey. We're going to be talking about the results of that and kind of revisiting and refining mission statement and goals and looking at what activities we have done and planning for the year ahead. And of course, again, we've done all of this while we're in our home offices, right?
Sitting on the couch.
Well, as we move forward with the coastal resilience plan process, I'm sure that it will be helpful to make sure that the people who are writing the plan are aware of the work that you're doing, you know, whether that's through one of our committee meetings or otherwise. But you know, we'll definitely stay in touch, I think.
Well, and even if it's just also promoting meetings that are being organized as part of the plan or by the Coastal Resilience Advisory, thanks to Kim, you know, we do have a nice website now. Our social media is growing and more people are following it. So I think it's a great communication tool.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you, Marty. Thank you, Kim, for joining us today. I know you have other things you need to be doing today, so if you want to drop off, that's fine. Appreciate your being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. Again, I apologize with the power situation.
Yeah. out of your hands.
All right, take
All right.
care.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
All right, moving to the next item on our agenda, which is a committee discussion. And the first topic is discussing the presentation of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee recommendation to the Select Board. So there are two things here. The first is that we adopted the recommendation at our last meeting, but we didn't really think about who was going to present it to the Select Board, what might be said in that presentation. And so we had the opportunity to move that presentation to tomorrow instead of last week. And I thought it would be good to do that so that we would have a chance to discuss that today. The second thing that is important here is the assumption was that as the chair, I would be tapped to present. And so I started preparing to do that and realized that there are a couple of corrections and clarifications that I think we should make to our statement before it's presented. So let me start with those, and then we can move into discussing how we would present. And the how is mostly that I didn't want to stand up there without having had any input from the committee. And I think that potentially you'll have comments and answers that I will be able to put to good use if I'm the person standing there, you know, metaphorically standing there in front of the Select Board. So I'm looking forward to that input as well as wanting to give you the opportunity for it. So Vince, if you can put that recommendation on the screen. Did we lose Vince? Oh no. All right, let me see if I can do that from, it's not on this computer. Does anybody have that recommendation and I can allow you to screen share it until Vince comes back? Don't know how we lost him. Maybe there's a rolling power outage downtown. He's not far from Sherburne Hall. So this would have been sent out in an email. I'm not on my main computer. I'm on the computer that's better for Zoom meetings. So unfortunately, I don't have it at my fingertips.
Yeah,
Matt, you've got it up?
I don't have it either, and I have to leave in about 4 minutes.
Okay, let me run through let me run through what the changes are. First, in our intent, we said that the intent was to supplement the FEMA regulations, and the clarification there would be to add, because the FEMA standards do not include an allowance for sea level rise. So I've got nods. Does anybody have an objection to adding that clarification? Okay. It looks like Vince is trying to come back. Sorry.
I don't really know what happened, and it looks like it continued recording, so everything's okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's because you made me a host, so I was able to, I didn't have to do anything. It just kept rolling, fortunately.
Sorry,
So-
I lost internet entirely for a few
Yeah,
minutes.
yeah. Well, you're not far from Sherburne Hall, so maybe there's a power thing going around, but it's a virus, you know. So, all right, I got one laugh out of that. So Vince, what I just briefly put forward the FEMA clarification that we're adding the phrase because the FEMA standards do not include a reference for sea level rise, or whatever the right wording is in order to clarify that.
Okay, do I need to put the recommendation?
Yes, if you
up?
can put that up, please. I'm trying to go quickly because Matt has to drop off. The second thing that I wanted to do was we have a statement that says that according to the Coastal Risk Assessment and Resilience Strategies report, they recommend using the intermediate high, and that is actually not accurate. The quote from the report is, for planning purposes, we recommend using the intermediate or high scenario. And that's a significant difference because the our recommendation is to use the high scenario, and we recognize that there was a conflict if the report was making the intermediate high scenario, but the report isn't making that a conflict. So my suggestion is to replace that sentence where it says the projected sea level rise for Nantucket is 4 to 6 feet by 2100, that entire sentence, and instead quote the report directly. And just to further that, the report doesn't say 4 to 6 feet, it says at least 4 to 6 feet. So I think quoting the report directly shows that we are making a recommendation that is taken directly from the report, which is we are choosing the high out of the choice between intermediate and high in the report, and that it's not limited to 4 to 6 feet, it's at least 4 to 6 feet. Vince, do you have that report handy to put on the screen? Well, it's page 42 of the PDF, page 26 of the report, so that people can see. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just, while Vince is looking that up, so that actually changes our recommendation from, our recommendation was using the intermediate high, and now we'd be using the high?
No, the recommendation was to use the high scenario.
Okay, sorry.
So our recommendation doesn't change, but we are adding corrections and clarification to the supporting information.
Great, thank you. I just wanted clarification.
Any other discussion of those two changes?
I'm going to stop sharing. And
Matt?
I'm good.
Okay.
does this look appropriate?
Yes, that's what I'm looking for. And so I just want people to see that, the actual wording in the report. It's an easy slip of the tongue because of the way that they labeled these scenarios. But I think that we have a much stronger document when we make those two changes. So do I have a motion? And Jennifer, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. Just to clarify, you want to add to the wording that Vince has highlighted there, but do you also add what's in the box there with the at least 4 to 6 feet?
We can. I don't want to make it too complicated. We can put in that entire paragraph because the box just summarizes the paragraph. But when I looked at, let's just keep it simple. Let's put that paragraph in, quoting it from the report, and take our sentence out. Does that make sense to everyone? Sarah? I
worry if we put that paragraph in, it says it's advisable to use intermediate or high, so then people will use intermediate. Like that, I just want to, I'm a little nervous about.
I understand where you're coming from on that. I think that our recommendation of high still stands. This is supporting information. I mean, we're referencing the report by including a web link to it on the library page. So it is there. I think what we were doing with the supporting information was providing the, I don't want to use the word justification, but providing the train of thought, you know, going from the document that we received on behalf of the town to our specific recommendation. One of the things that I wanted to say in my opening remarks was that in our discussions on that report, what came up was the need for clarity and specific guidelines. And that's why we are putting this recommendation forth to not, so that people do not have to look at all the different data sets and look at the range of recommendations and try and figure out which one is the right one for them. And as Fritz was saying with the planning board, you know, how do they know what standard to apply when there's so many to pick from and so on. So the purpose of our recommendation is to provide that guidance of this is what we recommend as the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee from this report, which has done the research. So if that helps there, I agree. It's hard. I mean, it starts talking about the Massachusetts projections and, you know, it gets muddier and muddier, but we have to, I think it's good to have some, you know, follow the dots kind of pathway in the supporting information.
Okay, I just, you know, I think I totally agree with you in terms of all we've talked about before about the reasoning and the why we're doing this is to be clear. And I just was worried that adding this, even like we can cite it, but adding this specifically to me kind of muddied it more. Like people could look at it and cherry pick something. But I just wanted to bring it up because I just, you know, if our goal is to be really clear, but I understand also the need for the supporting info. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yep. Further comments? Okay. Gary, anything from you or?
No further comments.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
fine.
Fritz, anything from you? I just want to make sure we get a chance to hear from everybody.
No, that's fine.
Oh, and Graham?
I'm just curious to see how this fits in. I would like to see that first. Just make sure we're all on the
Vince,
same
can you do a copy and paste, Vince? And thank you, Graham. I think that's a good suggestion.
This will just look a bit weird and it's taking up everything here. And I'm just going to stop before table 1. Does that seem right?
We can't see it yet. We're still looking at the old.
I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
And then I shall share the recommendation. Okay, so we're coming down as far as the end of the first sentence, which is here, correct?
Yes.
Okay, let's put that in there.
And what I was thinking when I looked at it, we might make that the first sentence, so before the previous paragraph, and it might flow a little bit better. So if you want to undo and then put it in the front. That isn't exactly what, can you just undo?
So
undo again. Oh, I don't know where we're going.
okay.
Okay. Yeah, and just paste there. Yes.
And then this whole piece here would be deleted, correct?
Right. And so we'd need to say something like, we'd need to put quotes around that first paragraph and reference the report. Hang on, sorry. No, we're not in the right place anymore. We've got Noah twice. We lost the reference to the report with the copying and pasting.
Beg your pardon.
Yeah, no, it's must be twice as hard to do this kind of editing while you're in a Zoom meeting.
Yes, and then this still goes away.
That goes, yes.
Add quotes, and then I'll put in the correct reference for the name of the report after. I'm just going to put in a little comment for myself, and I think Graham has raised your hand.
Graham?
I would propose having it where we had it before and just starting it off. So the Nantucket sea level rise projections, that section would start with the paragraph we originally had. NOAA has developed specific.
Okay, so the first copy and paste that Vince did, you prefer that?
Yes, and let me just finish before you change it and see if there's agreement or not.
Yeah.
And then to continue on in replacing the sentence, the projected sea level rise for Nantucket's 4 to 6 feet, by saying the town of Nantucket Coastal Resilience Risk Assessment and Strategies report advises to use intermediate and high sea level rise projections. And then the following sentence would go on as we currently have it, saying CRAC recommends high projections be used.
Comments? Does anyone prefer one way or the other way?
I guess just the reasoning behind that was, to Sarah's point, to minimize confusion. And when we have two sentences that follow each other, kind of, this is what's proposed in this report, and then this is what we're proposing, rather than having the NOAA just general information between the two and losing track of that.
That's a good point.
I like Graham's suggestion.
Okay, so Vince, you were on target the first time around. Why don't we switch that back?
So you want to put this text from up here
Right.
down into this replaced sentence.
Right.
Okay. And then just pop that there. Is that it? Am I correct? Just
Graham, that's what you were?
Yeah, and if we can just to make it run together better, if we just, the Town of Nantucket Coastal Resilience Risk Assessment and Strategies report, just the name of the report, put it at the beginning of that paragraph. And
right, so that's Vince's note about referencing the report. So that reference would go at the beginning rather than the end, is what you're saying?
yes, and to specify what report it is to begin with.
Yeah.
Sure thing.
I think it's important to keep the for planning purposes, because I think that's a very powerful statement coming out of the report. So I don't want to just go straight and say the report advises.
I'll pop it up afterwards. Sorry.
Yeah. Also, the name of the report, it's a mouthful, but it is the Coastal Risk Assessment and Resilience Strategies. It's not the Coastal Resilience Risk and Assessment. Anyway.
Okay, I'll get the correct name.
Yeah. And okay, the other suggestion that's just coming to me now, in the sentence that we've deleted, we had highlighted the 4 to 6 in bold. I wonder if we want to put bold on the high and the at least 4 to 6 in the quote from the report, or do we then have to explain that the emphasis is added?
I don't think so. That's what you're looking for?
Yeah. How do people feel about that? Okay, any further comments on changing this section? Do we like the way that it's come out? Graham, I think you have a permanent hand raise. I'm not sure if I need to put it down or if you need to put it down. Okay, got it. All right, so we'll entertain a motion to make these changes to the document subject to polishing of the exact language by Vince, should that need to be done. Vince, are you clear on the change to the intent sentence? I know you were.
No, I'm not clear on the intent sentence.
Okay, so the purpose of the recommendation is to supplement the FEMA flood elevations because they do not, I don't know if the right, they don't reference sea level rise, or they don't include sea level rise.
that appropriate, as they do not, as it does not include sea level rise?
Okay. Yeah, and again, I think, you know, you can get the right language there.
It does not include sea level rise. Crikey. I will learn to spell eventually, I promise people. Is that appropriate?
Okay. Right, any comments there?
No.
All right, do we have a motion to amend the recommendation?
Can I make one more
Yes, Vince?
quick question? I'm sorry about this now. As it's currently worded, I just think that one more phrase somewhere in the report to say that it's, you know, not retrospective, that it's from the time it's accepted by the select board going on, just so that it can't.
I think that's up to the select board.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it is understood that we can't change the rules in the past, but I think that's a topic of discussion, and that's one of my questions that I want to come to as we talk about the presentation. I don't want to muddy the waters. We'll talk about the F. All right, does anybody else feel that we should make a statement in the recommendation regarding when it would apply or to what projects it would apply? Or do you want this to stand? Sarah?
I think this should stand as it is. And as you were starting to say, Mary, it's sort of, well, it's definitely the discretion of the select board, and maybe that's part of the discussion. Maybe we can talk as a group right now about what some ideas are, but I don't feel informed enough about all the workings of our town government to make that recommendation specifically.
Right, it's kind of what I'm saying is our knitting is sea level rise, and we're making a recommendation specific to sea level rise, and the rest of it really is up to the people who are responsible for implementation of those recommendations. We have no power or authority there. So that's kind of my feeling on it.
I agree.
What we can do though is I can move on to the presentation discussion, and then at the end of that we can come back to ratify this document if that makes more sense. I just didn't want to have to do it twice, but we can avoid that by not doing it first. Is that acceptable to people? Okay.
Okay.
All right, let me pause for a second. Okay, so we did get some feedback because this was posted in last week's select board agenda. And what I'd like to do is sort of play devil's advocate, where I can play the part of somebody who's questioning why we are recommending this. And what I'd like to get back from committee members is your thoughts on why we're recommending it, how you would respond to somebody making that question. And then let me pause on that for a second. Does anybody else want to present this rather than me? Or does everybody want me to present it? Yeah, okay, I'm taking that for granted, sort of, but wanted to get the backing of the committee on that. Let's go right to the question that Vince just brought up. People asked, what projects does this apply to? Does it apply to a project that is that has not received final approval but is in the process? Does it apply to projects that have received approval but aren't built yet? Does it apply to projects that are moving forward but at the design stage? Does it only apply to projects which would be new at this point? So what was the committee's intent on how we thought this should apply? Jen?
At least from my perspective and through our discussions, it seemed like we were giving advice to the various boards as they were making deliberations. So I would assume then that if we put this forward, and if the select board wants to do it differently, but my assumption was whatever board is considering an application, as they're considering it, then they would use the recommendations that are being put forward. I don't think we should send anything back for reconsideration. That's a lot of time and money for a lot of people, the boards and the applicants as well. But I think if there are things that are moving through the system right now and the select board thinks it's okay to begin applying this immediately, then I think that it can begin to be considered. I think that if there are, projects that say boards have been discussing for a few weeks, and it might be at the discretion of the board to decide how and if and what they would make changes to, because again, that is extra time and cost. But I think it's as things begin to move forward from this point. That would be my thought.
I agree with Jen. You can't ask people who've gotten approval and are halfway through to say, uh-oh, we have to stop and redo everything. So I agree with Jen.
Other thoughts? Sarah?
I'm sorry.
Sarah had her hand up and then Fritz.
Yeah.
So I would also agree that to Jen's point about saying that it's up to each committee too, because they know best what they are, deciding about, whether it's, the Concom or the planning department, but also if it comes up, there are going to be new recommendations for the historic preservation side of things coming through the, so I know, that that's going to be incorporated into that. So, but that's coming down the line. So I think kind of that might be something to mention too, if it gets discussed. And then the other thing I would say was, even though we are making this recommendation to the board and it's going, and our recommendation would be to new construction or new plans, we're also putting it out to the communities to have clear information for people to make their own decisions so that everyone is using the best information. So maybe you already have your permit, but when you see something like this and you have it might, I don't know the right way to say it, but it's basically like to be informative to the community as well, even if there's not, it's kind of like best practices, but also we, for your own home and property, you might want to consider these things because it might affect you in a financial, or a direct impact way.
Right, and I'll go to Fritz and then to Graham, but one of the things that I planned to say was we are doing this for several purposes. One is to provide awareness to the community that this information is out there and that we feel that it's something that should be part of your planning process. One is to provide clarity as to how to use this information. We are making the report more specific in, it presents a lot of different things, but it doesn't tell us what to do. So we're attempting to provide more specific guidance than was issued in the report. And the third thing I think that I was going to say or try to was that this is an incremental process. So the town, created the position of Coastal Resilience Coordinator and created the committee and commissioned the strategies report. And so this is an incremental step, to make a recommendation based on the strategies report, waiting for the Coastal Resilience Plan, which is still some time away, but we don't want to lose time until that arrives. So those are kind of like the three purposes of the recommendation, if you will. Fritz, go ahead, please.
My only thought would be, speaking again from somebody who sits on a board, just a couple of comments. On one hand, we frequently see that when a new proposal comes out, that applicants will rush to file applications with the understanding, hope, or the law saying that they won't apply to any application filed before the date something happens, which is unfortunate because, that happened with swimming pools. It creates a rush of applications simply to protect themselves. So that's one thought. On the other hand, I look at it and I think sometimes, clearly, we can't do something that's retrospective in any way. And from a practical point of view, engineering studies, things like that can be quite expensive. So to ask somebody who may have done that work to go back and do it again, although I am certainly in favor of having all of this implemented as soon as we can, as a practical matter, the sort of the phrase "in process." So somewhere where the application's been filed, but it's still in process. It hasn't been, does that mean it hasn't been approved? It hasn't gone to a public hearing? It hasn't, there could be a lot of questions about what does that mean? Which leaves me, I guess, with saying either you leave it up to the individual committees to decide how it's going to be implemented, because there may be differences in the procedures or how they go about making decisions. Although I think in almost all cases, it would start with an application. I might be inclined, it would either be that or maybe so far as saying either leaving it up to the commissions or I'm sorry, the committees or boards, or saying the recommendation would be that it apply to applications filed after a certain date. I know that probably lets a few people through, but at least it gives some certainty.
So part of my thought process on this was going back to this point that we're an advisory committee. We have a very narrow focus. I don't know how we could be expected to come up with specific regulations to propose that would apply to areas where we may have no knowledge. That's one piece of thinking about it. The second was we have multiple constituencies for this. We have the projects that are town-owned, which are, in a sense, the most important ones to us. But we also have projects which the town approves, which are handled by private companies. And one of the things that I planned to say was that, in the vein of raising awareness, we're trying to make this information available, and we would hope that people would take advantage of it because it's in their self-interest to do so. But we're not suggesting that a regulation be immediately drafted and immediately in effect, that everybody must do an engineering study based on, I don't know how we could draft a regulation. We don't have the knowledge, this is me speaking personally, to do that. But we're trying to stay within our scope, which is making a recommendation to the select board about sea level rise. And it's kind of, I don't like to sound like we don't care what kind of impact this has, but that's kind of out of our hands. I don't know, what do you feel about that? And Graham, I know you're waiting.
I just think that a lot of this goes back to us trying to be proactive rather than reactive. And I think in the past, the town has really been reactive to things, and it costs a lot of money. It takes a lot of efforts to try to even that's what we're kind of experiencing now. Not that we could have ever controlled that way back when historic Nantucket was built, but we're being reactive to a historic downtown that we want to preserve with sea level rise. So it's kind of in people's best interest to take this. We're not putting any rules forth at this point, but just letting people know so they can be proactive in making the right decisions so they don't have to undo everything later on.
Yeah, other thoughts? Fritz, we lost your video, but I hope you're still with us.
I know, I'm still with you.
Okay.
I'm on low battery, so I plugged in,
yeah.
and the screen hasn't come back up yet, but I'm afraid to touch anything because if I do, I may lose the whole meeting. So
we can hear you. That's good.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Jen.
Fritz's point is very good as far as, wanting to know or thinking about not encouraging people to have to redo, engineering studies and projects and proposals that are already in place. And is there kind of a drop dead date where we want them to strongly consider? I wonder if in the presentation to the select board, the way to go about it is to give a date where we think, or have them select a date where we think that's enough time for the boards to make this a requirement, but also then encourage the board to even before then begin looking at the proposals that are before them through this lens so that they can start understanding what that means. Maybe not necessarily requiring that, new engineering plans be drawn up, but to begin to have those discussions and the projects they're looking at and where it applies to. I wonder if it's kind of the both sides of the coin, so that we start the conversation already and awareness already, and then have a point in time where it's clear for the boards that this is what we want to have happen.
So again, I go back to, we are not proposing a regulation. We are making a recommendation. We're making that recommendation because we believe it is in the best interest of any party who is doing a construction project on the island, but particularly in the best interest of the town to evaluate that project with a lens of, for the expected lifetime of the project, how will it respond to sea level rise at the rates that we're recommending they look, which is a tortured sentence, but Graham.
I think maybe I'm misunderstanding this document, but my understanding was that this is kind of a temporary document we're putting forth until the coastal resiliency plan is made. Right. And so I think that would be the point where that has more the hard deadline and maybe regulations come out of it.
Right. Right, absolutely right. Yeah, Vince?
Yeah, I must apologize now that discussion seems to have gone on. I interrupted the vote you were calling for earlier, Mary.
No, I decided not to call for a vote on the document, so we're good. Fritz, since I can't see you, you're just going to have to shout out if you have something you want to add.
I will.
Okay. All right. Another suggestion we received was, should we sit down with some of the town department heads and discuss this with them before going to the select board? Thoughts on that, Graham?
I know maybe Vince can also speak to this, but I know the department heads I work with are slammed right now and can't even get to their own staff. So I would recommend waiting on that until later.
Okay.
It's Fritz.
Yes.
I think I would say the same. I'm afraid if you start going to each of the departments, you may get pushback or you may get lots of questions, and it's just going to slow the process down.
Sarah, did you have something too? Or?
Oh, it's just more or less along the same lines as what Fritz just said. I think if we would, if there are receptive boards or groups that want information after the select board either adopts the recommendation or changes it, whatever the select board does with it, then I feel like I would be willing to kind of help with that, some of that dissemination and those meetings, whether we invite people to our meeting or we go to where they are. But I think that it would have more meat and be listened to more if the select board adopted it in some way. Or accepted it. I don't know what the right term is.
So my thought on this was that we are acting within our scope to advise the select board. And it's not within our scope to run that past all the department heads before we give that advice. I think we own our advice. It's up to the select board to decide what to do with that advice. So it's premature for us to get everybody else to buy in before we make the recommendation. Try and say that as diplomatically as possible if I need to say that. Okay, Vince, other feedback that we got, let me pull up. Sorry, I need to get that back on my screen.
I think Fritz covered the one other question that I had about how committees and commissions would implement it. when he was talking about the planning board, because I would have just raised the same thing slightly differently with the with CONCOM. How could CONCOM implement it? And I think Fritz covered that one.
So one other comment we got was that it wasn't specific enough. And again, I think that goes to, this is an interim recommendation until the coastal resilience plan provides the specifics. It's not appropriate for us to try and write a coastal resilience plan ourselves right now in order to make a recommendation.
And moreover, just to emphasize that point, Mary, this committee has gone with the high recommendation, which should include some level of redundancy as well. And that is only interim as well.
Yeah. So thank you, Vince, for bringing that, because I wrote down a couple of reasons for that redundancy, and I want to make sure that if committee members had other reasons that I was able to capture those and present them. So we did mention in the supporting information the stacking of high tide, rainfall from storms, and sea level rise all combining to produce a higher event than any one prediction. We also wanted to, I think the quote itself from the report says, to provide some protection from the possibility of the extreme scenario. We came up with to provide some protection from the possibility of accelerated sea level rise, so beyond what is currently forecast. You know, Vince in particular, I was talking to him yesterday about not being able to see, you know, or not being able to wrap your mind around that acceleration, that it's not just, you know, going up in a straight line, it's going up, you know, asymptotically in a massive parabolic curve. And from my perspective, the science is leaning towards more extreme, and I'm not going to say this publicly, I'm trying to articulate it for the committee, more extreme consequences because we are not making significant mitigation efforts on global warming. Am I in the right ballpark with that? People give me feedback on this, because I'm trying to articulate something, but I don't want to make that the official position. Jennifer?
I think, and let's see if this works for what you're trying to say, but I think the modeled scenarios going forward are showing that unless there's significant change now in behaviors, then we are seeing acceleration by, you know, 2050, and that so far those significant changes in behavior are not occurring. Mm-hmm. So we're at a turning point where if there is not significant change in the next year, 2 years, then we will see acceleration.
Okay. Okay. Other thoughts on that, Vince?
Just to reinforce Jen's point, great point. I would just replace the word behaviors with carbon output, because the models are all directly linked to carbon output. That is a behavior, and we need to bring that back. Okay. But reality is, I don't see it happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm trying not to get political unless forced to go there, but yeah. Other thoughts before I go on? Sarah?
I was just saying, like, all of your points I think are really good, and I think keeping in mind that maybe the spirit of like helping the community, like we're giving, you know, as people give pushback, it's making it more about them, you know, like about like we're doing this because the, you know, we serve the town and we know that this is coming, and so we want our town to be prepared, and we want all of you to be prepared. And I don't know, just sometimes when you put it back on people, I mean, you probably know all this, but I keep thinking of it like just in the back of my mind about being a little bit, maybe not positive, but like we're doing this for you. We're not coming down on the town and being like, you have to do all these things. We're more like coming at it from, we have this information and we need to incorporate it now while people can do things about it, and because we want us all to be safe and good and protect everybody's property. So
right, and to that point, from a business standpoint, there's an old sort of a cliche that people have to hear something 7 times before they really hear it. And so the more we talk about this, the more it reaches the community. And so I think it's important that we do take these steps. You know, we formed a committee, we hired somebody, we got a document, we're you know, having a conversation, and this is going to lead into what I hope our Piety will talk to us about, but more on that later. Other reasons for redundancy: sea level rise doesn't stop at 2100. You know, it will continue potentially. So might as well be prepared. And as I said before, it's nonlinear. It may exceed the target. So this is something I got out of looking at the data with Vince yesterday. The sea level rise is nonlinear, not meaning that not only is it not a straight line, but a curve. It's also not, it's not an average. So it could go up more in a year and then retreat in a following year. Well, if your house is already washed away because it went up more than we projected it to, that retreat in the next year isn't going to help. So there's the possibility of those of that variation around the prediction that you know, going high rather than intermediate provides a little protection from. You know, intermediate could be the long-term correct scenario, but we might hit some of those high points along the way. So these are just things that I'm, you know, trying to be able to be prepared to, you know, if somebody says something, that I can rebut that in a, you know, gentle way. Sarah?
One other thought I keep thinking about is for people maybe that don't think about this all the time like we do, when you start to mention it, they think immediately of like Brant Point, Easy Street, like the areas that flood now. And I think if we talk about like we're using the high and like in certain timelines will illustrate areas that people don't think of now that they need to start planning because in a certain timeline that there is a risk to their property. And so, you know, like to Graham's point about not being reactive, being proactive. And because I think that's where I could see some pushback too, with people saying, well, I don't live in, you know, the regularly flooding area of Brant Point right now. And you're like, yeah, but like where you do live, you know, whether it's, I know I can't think of anything off the top of my head right now, but it
well, the
might be
dump
more
is a
at
good
risk
example.
in the near future.
Yeah, the dump is a good example. Is that even if the dump itself was not inundated, Matticat Road could be. So you'd have no access to the dump.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think about, because I'm at Linda Loring on Eel Point Road, we think about it a lot because people don't think of like across the street from Linda Loring, those homes aren't really subject to like immediate sea level rise, but because of long ponds coming up, there's like the road is projected to be flooded out, you know, with a certain amount of sea level rise. So if you look further ahead, then people have to make contingency plans or think about that for the future that live in that area. So it's all those things that maybe aren't right in their face. Like, I don't live on Baxter Road. Do I do that? You know, so it's kind of the redundancy helps put it in front of more people as well.
Yeah, I think that, you know, one of our big goals is that if we reach some people with this and then they say, oh, I need more information, and they go to our library or they go to their consultant or they go to wherever they're going to get that information from, then they become more informed and they make better decisions. I mean, that's kind of our core of our goal, I think, is that people will make better decisions because they have more information.
And one last thing too, just Mary, you bringing this up and presenting it, I think hearing what people say in response too will give us a really good indication of the work we need to do for education or the other things that people need information about. So I think that just the more we get out there,
yeah,
I think you're right. It's going to be informative to how we move forward.
Yeah. Vince, a quick fact check. Gary, do you have your hand up to say something? Yeah, go ahead and unmute.
The question I have is, suppose at the meeting, someone asks you, there's a point that I suggested before that might become an issue. Right now, the recommendation says CRAC recommends, the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Commission recommends. And suppose someone on the on the select board says, do you expect us to say that it is we who are recommending? In other words, is this the recommendation that comes from this advisory commission only, or is it supposed to be coming from us? We did not change the language. to say that the select board recommends that everybody pay attention to this. What we're saying is the CRAC recommends that everyone pay attention to this. So if someone on the select board says to you, are you asking us, the select board, to actually be the ones making that recommendation? What will you say?
I think we're asking them to accept our recommendation and to adopt it. So to endorse it, I don't know what the right political language is, but yes, we're asking them to make it their own. I think is the
Or
sense.
at least endorsing it is probably what you are referring
Okay,
to.
yeah.
And that might have the same positive effect.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. That's a good thing
Okay.
for me to keep in mind. Yeah.
Yep.
Vince, quick fact check. There are FEMA maps that were supposed to come out this spring, have been delayed towards the fall. Remind me what those are maps of. Are they flood maps? Are they erosion maps?
The ones that I'm waiting on that are delayed to the fall, probably even the last quarter of the year, are erosion maps.
Erosion map. Okay,
Yeah.
so they're not particularly relevant to this discussion right now.
Not the way flooding is.
Right.
Increased sea level rise causes more erosion.
Yeah.
So there's a knock-on effect. Oh, sorry, there's a perfectly related effect. So it is something that would be beneficial, but
it's not primary to this discussion. Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say it's not primary. Maybe Jen has a point there.
I think that once they are released, they will be primary to the discussion.
Okay.
It will probably be something we want to revisit as far as our recommendation.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that. Yeah. Okay. I want to be careful about time. So it's 11:30. Other thoughts from committee members about what you would want me to communicate to the select board and to the general public as I'm making this presentation? Okay, let me read off what I wrote so far as sort of opening remarks. So the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee was formed by the Select Board a year ago to assist newly hired Coastal Resilience Coordinator Vince Murphy with implementing a Coastal Resilience Plan, with integrating Coastal Resilience Plan with other town planning documents, with reviewing existing regulations, and with keeping the Select Board up to date on impacts from sea level rise. That's directly from our purpose statement on the web. Thanks to hard work from Vince, Holly Backus, and Chuck Larson. Vince, let me know if I need another name in there. We expect the contract for developing the Coastal Resilience Plan to be awarded at the end of the summer, purposely vague language. This is unfortunately 2 years behind the town's original schedule, and we anticipate it will be a further 12 to 18 months before the town receives the final Coastal Resilience Plan. In the interim, we feel it's important to begin incorporating sea level rise planning into current projects. And I use the word planning there, not data, on purpose. The town received a coastal risk assessment and resilience strategies report in January, which offers a sobering look at the risks the town faced from sea level rise. However, the report doesn't recommend specific mitigation solutions for specific areas, which is what the future Coastal Resilience Plan will do. The strategy report does offer this recommendation on page 26. For planning purposes, it is advisable to use intermediate or high sea level rise projections such that a community will be better protected against worst case scenarios. One of the points that came up in our committee discussion of the strategies report is the need for a specific standard to provide clear guidance. With our recommendation, we wanted to extract from the strategies report the key point which is to be aware of sea level rise and how to plan accordingly until we have more location-specific guidance from the Coastal Resilience Plan. Therefore, we're providing this recommendation, to provide awareness, clarity, and in preparation for the 2021 Coastal Resilience Plan, and then the recommendation. So that's kind of where I am right now. Happy to take feedback and suggestions on that.
It's Fritz.
Yep.
I think it's excellent. Just listening to it, I think I think it's complete, and I think it's a great job. Just obviously something that just occurred to me is, as you read that, and we keep talking about 18 to 24 months, one question, which I think has the obvious answer, but just one question that the board may come to us with is, or respond to you about is, well, do you intend that this recommendation be adopted before before the report is complete. And I mean, maybe it's clear you said that, but recommend that it be adopted for use now. And obviously the answer is yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's trying to sort of set that up in the remarks. Yes. Yeah. Vince?
You asked me about name checking anyone
Yeah.
else. You put my name, Chuck, and Holly's.
Yeah.
Don't forget to add crack in there. Everyone was involved.
Thank you, Vince. Okay, hard work from the committee, Vince, Holly, and Chuck.
Perfect.
Appreciate that.
No worries. I think it's incredibly well written. Then once you read the statement and then gets into the discussion, that'll be very, very useful. And you have to just, as you said, really put out the emphasis. This is only a recommendation. We're not putting any like planning documents or a map involved in this. Sorry, not me, the committee.
Yeah.
So, it just follows on from that and from the report that was accepted in January by the admin.
Okay. So we have to go back to the recommendation itself and take a vote to adopt the recommendation with the changes that we've made today.
I would move that, it's Fritz.
Yep.
I would move that we adopt the changes to the recommendation or the explanation of the recommendation that previously discussed. I don't know if I need more. I guess that's it.
Okay, second.
Seconded.
Thank you, Graham. So all those in favor by roll call, your screens have moved around, so it'll be a different order. Jennifer Carberg.
Aye.
Graham Durovich.
Aye.
Gary Beller.
Aye, but I just want to mention that the board may have already received their paperwork. If the meeting's tomorrow,
They will update it.
they will update it. Okay.
Yep.
Hey.
Yeah. Sarah, Boyce.
In favor, or aye.
Yeah. And Fritz McClure.
Yes.
Mary Longacre, aye. So that is adopted. All righty. Next item on the agenda: update on potential conversation with RP Eddy. So this was originally my idea. I read his book Warnings. He has a chapter on coastal resilience being one of those topics that people are trying to warn us about, and the warnings at the time he wrote the book were being largely ignored. What was interesting was I'd sent out a link to an interview. I don't know if you were able to listen to it, but he's made a comment that he thinks his next book should be about how do you get heard? How do you get those warnings to be received and acted upon? And I thought that was an excellent topic for us to consider. Unfortunately, he said he's not going to be writing that book for quite some time. So he did agree that to have a conversation with us in August, which I wanted to wait until after we had this meeting and tomorrow's meeting to schedule. And as a little background, the Nantucket Project started a video conversation series with RP Eddy in response to COVID. They have been less frequent because they've talked about everything they can think about with COVID. But one of the things that I've been seeing talked about in general is what lessons can we learn from our experience with the pandemic that we can apply to our coming need to address climate change. And so I thought RP Eddy would be a great person to give us some perspective on, are there any lessons that he thinks that we can adopt? Are there any suggestions that he can offer us in how we can be effective in getting our message heard and acted upon? So that is the intention for the conversation. We don't know yet because we haven't communicated with the Nantucket Project and RP Eddy about what the structure of that conversation will be. If it follows the previous conversation that the Nantucket Project had with Dawn and with Matt as select board members about the COVID situation on Nantucket, then it would be a Nantucket Project interview with RP Eddy and with representatives, possibly me and Matt, me and Vince, Matt and Vince. We don't know yet. We haven't made that determination as to who will be in that conversation. But the way that I intended to approach it was to essentially write a brief saying, here's what we're looking for, more or less what I just told you, maybe with a couple of specific questions, and ask RP Eddy to address that topic. So that's kind of the thought right now about what would happen. Feedback, welcome, and any ideas that you have. Sarah?
So how you just presented it was a little different than how I thought it was based on the email that we got. I kind of thought it was going to be, he was going to be talking to us and giving us advice. But now it sounds like this is a public outreach, like with the Nantucket Project,
We don't know that yet. And that's
Okay.
one of the things that Vince was working on behind the scenes is sort of who owns this interview. Would it be produced by the Nantucket Project with their resources? Would it be produced by the town with our resources? Would we have the rights to redistribute or to cut up the content and repackage it? We don't know yet. But what we do know is that RP Eddy is volunteering to do this. The connection was made through the Nantucket Project. And so my approach is to let them know what we are looking for and find out what they are willing to do, rather than trying to sign them up for something that we're going to make extensive use of their free contribution, unless they're okay with that. I don't know. But I wanted to give them input into that arrangement. Vince?
Yep. So part of Sarah's misunderstanding is my fault originally, because that was the original information that I sent out, because I misunderstood originally. And then, so the way that it's probably going to work now, as Mary's already put all this out there, hopefully it'll all work through the Nantucket Project. They have, I can't remember the gentleman's name, they have someone that might be willing to act as either a moderator or an interviewer.
Oh, Tom Scott. Yeah.
Thank you. And then have some combination of people with RP Eddy, probably somewhere in the middle of myself, Mary, or Matt Fee, or any other combination if anyone wanted to put their hand up. If the Nantucket Project didn't want to be involved, the backup plan is that we do it through NCTV, but that is just a backup plan. And then it would be definitely no problem for the town to use that. But because this originated with the Nantucket Project, we're going to start there.
Sarah?
So I think this is great if we can get, because whether we partner with the Nantucket Project or RP Eddy, who has a broad reach, obviously this would get information out to a broader audience. I just really feel like we should have talked about this at the education subcommittee when we were talking about priorities for education, because I think that this is awesome, and I'm not trying to look a gift horse in the mouth, but I think that if it's going to be something that we as a committee are involved with, we have to have some sort of set of goals, like number one, what we want to get out of it, but also what we want to put out. And so I think that I don't want to deflate this and make it like not happen, but I really feel like we need to have a bigger conversation about what this is, if crack is going to be involved. If the Nantucket Project and RP Eddy want to talk about coastal resiliency and climate change, that is awesome. But if we are going to put the crack name on it, we need to have like kind of a unified force about either what questions we're asking, who's qualified to answer them, and does the town, I just think we have to be careful when it's the whole committee.
So point well taken. Didn't think of it previously. Sorry about that. In terms of the education committee, my intent is not to ask any scientific questions. RP Eddy is not a scientist. He doesn't study climate change and coastal resiliency. So that wasn't the avenue where I saw this conversation going. For me, it's really about communication strategies. And you're right, I didn't think about that as being very pertinent to the education subcommittee. I don't know if that helps, Sarah, or if you want to respond to that?
I just feel like, well, communications is education.
Yeah.
And so I think I wasn't coming at it from a scientific perspective, but I think that if we're soliciting advice, so when I originally thought that this was someone we were inviting to our committee that we could, you know, get advice on how to communicate climate change to a community or what, you know, or some difficult topic, because obviously his expertise is in kind of all these different types of communication. I think that was a different conversation if he was coming to us. But if it's kind of putting it out there, I just feel like we should, before, you know, I guess, I know we're getting tight on time, but if we're going to have this, our next meeting is August with this, then I think we need to have a discussion about what the topics are that are covered if Crack's name is going to be on it.
So that's one thing that we can do is offer that invitation as a scenario that he could appear at a meeting rather than taping a conversation. My assumption was that that wasn't a good use of his time for him, but it's you know, again, that's why I wanted to bring it today to have this conversation, because I don't represent the committee, and the goal of the committee needs the input from all of the members. So you know, this is a perfect example, something I didn't think of. You know, Vince, go ahead.
If there's going to be discussion about a script or sets of questions or something to that effect, in some ways it's easier for the education subcommittee to meet than for the whole crack committee. So perhaps the education subcommittee could meet in the near future to go over that if the committee agreed with that.
Okay, thoughts on that from both the people who are in the education subcommittee and the people who are not? How do people feel about that option?
I'll talk. I think that's great. I'm happy to take that on as education subcommittee, but I think that I kind of would like to know, before we schedule a meeting, to know what the response is from RPED, the Nantucket Project, and like kind of what their vision is. I don't want to lose the opportunity because I was kind of surprised when I saw all this that someone like RPED would come to one of our meetings. Honestly, that's where I was confused about to start. But I think that kind of knowing what they're interested in would help inform us of like what we would put together. And like are they interviewing you know, you guys? Are they interviewing the select board specifically? Do they just want to have a conversation with him and tackle climate change and coastal resiliency, and we provide some questions and input to ask him? You know, I think knowing what they're asking for, what they would like to do, since they would be sort of in the driver's seat, would help.
So a little more background. RPED was on vacation for the last couple of weeks. He is back, and Tom Scott is headed out on a road trip right now, I think this week. So we haven't been talking to them because we've been respecting the demands on their time. And I did want to come back to the committee before we tried to schedule anything or to make any decisions, so that we would, you know, have a coherent view of what we were looking for. I can certainly reach out and, you know, ask them, you know, of the following options, which ones would be acceptable, or is it a requirement that this be handled through the Nantucket Project, you know, so that we can get more clarification on that. I think Vince is now in touch with RPED's assistant who handles his schedule. So we can definitely put that forward and get that information and then schedule an education subcommittee meeting. Yeah, Graham, go ahead for a second.
I'm okay as a member of the education subcommittee to work on this. I would recommend it goes back, whatever questions we develop, it goes back to the whole committee for comments via email or something, because as a subcommittee, I think it's our job to report back to the committee and make sure our views that we've put together for the committee are actually representative of the committee.
Okay. Vince?
It doesn't matter at this point now.
Okay, yeah. Jennifer, you had something?
I'm liking a lot of what, Sarah has said, and I agree also with what Graham had said as far as, knowing what this is going to look like will help us give more input on the kinds of questions we would want to ask. And as a member not of the Education Committee, I like what Graham said about it coming back to us as well, because you would be representing the whole committee. And it sounds like time is tight, but I don't know if that's just because the discussion was about August, or if we
I don't think that there is a specific time frame. August was the earliest available. When we reached out, it was June, I think. And so the question initially was, sort of July or August, and they said absolutely not July. August could work, but I don't think there's any real urgency on our side. So if we take a little bit more time, and if that doesn't lose our opportunity, then that's fine, I think.
That seems at least reasonable from us being able to have an input, but I agree the opportunity is important. So if we do need to react faster, I just think keeping that communication open so we have the ability to do that would be great.
Okay, Fritz or Gary, any input from you? Does it sound like we have a plan? Gary?
It sounds like a good plan.
Thank you.
Yeah, sounds like it's Fritz. Sounds like a good plan to me.
Okay. All right, we have, let me open the floor for public comment. The only member of the public that I see attending is Liz Trios. Liz, do you have anything that you wanted to ask or add? Okay, I'm not hearing anything from Liz except maybe a bird in the background somewhere. So,
I'm sorry.
Oh, there you are, Liz.
Yes, I'd just like to thank you all for all the detail that you've attended to today, as usual. Again, thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. Committee reports from the Education Subcommittee. Sarah?
Oh yeah, so just really quickly, we met on Friday, and it was the first time we met since all the stay-at-home orders and everything. So it was a lot of it was just like kind of reconvening and reevaluating the goals. And so we decided to continue to work on our the homeowner leaflet sheet that we're doing. The other product we talked about doing was a science-based fact sheet, similar to something that we've seen from another community. And so it was more like a little PDF or something that would be designed nicely, but have some of the specific scientific information that, it'll help if the select board adopts our recommendation, but we'll have those kind of specific numbers for Nantucket, and that will be something in addition to the homeowner, like things you can do in your home for coastal resiliency. And so we're only meeting once a month, recognizing that summer is a really difficult time, but we're going to kind of move forward with that. And then the only other thing we really talked about that I wanted to share with this group was something I mentioned when Acclimate was on, about thinking about how, we're a volunteer committee and we have, limited resources, but we do represent the whole of the island. So while kind of being aware what the other groups are doing for education around coastal resiliency, it would be really good to not duplicate efforts, and so then find where the holes are and use our efforts to work on the rest of the community. So much is being done on town, which is really important, but because we do serve the entire island, we're thinking about other areas that we can serve. And then the only other thing, was that Graham suggested we do some either fact sheets or signage that are at wetland areas, kind of highlighting the natural environment and its importance. And we were like, we should get Jen to help us with that. So it was more, we're not ready to do that yet. It was kind of something down the line, but thinking about areas maybe outside of the town area, along the bike path, or really frequently visited areas that would be useful to provide some educational information. Of course, then we were thinking there's like NCF might be doing this in some areas, the land bank is going to be doing this in some areas. So it made us kind of realize coordinating efforts, or where we want to highlight those things, but kind of making sure first that other groups aren't doing that as well. Did I miss anything, or was there anything else you guys wanted to highlight? Jen?
I just want to say, as a member of one of those groups that often is talking about the things that we can do for education, we often don't necessarily have the time to bring some of those to fruition. So if a group like this was going to design templates that could then be given to those organizations to put up on their properties, that might be an excellent, excellent use of the education committee's time, because then the message is similar across the board, and maybe those organizations can then just add their logos to it, that kind of thing.
That's a really good point, Jen. I think that's, you know, we were talking about specific areas where like salt marshes are either helping the environment in specific ways that people will see, or areas like across from the Life-Saving Museum where a salt marsh might be, you know, impacted. But I think that if we come up with some general template about the importance of salt marshes, then that, you know, kind of template can be more or less used in different locations with just like a name change, or just even the very same thing with just a logo on it. That's a good point. Because I think there's a lot of, like we've talked about the natural environment being important, and you know, people that are visiting the island or people that live in other areas that aren't town might not be thinking about the sea level rise component. So having it, you know, like I said, in like high traffic areas that aren't town. So like areas of Matticat, you know, areas, specific areas along the bike path and those kind of things could be really useful in getting that message out more. But there'll be more forthcoming, but it's good to hear that kind of information.
Okay, does anybody else have a committee report that they want to bring forward today? All right, seeing none. Any other business that people have for the committee? Vince?
Did you, point 6C in the agenda was the RFP?
Yeah, I'm going to ask you, because I think it's mostly you just delivering information. If you could just send an email out to everybody, I think that would be the easier way to go.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah. Any other business for the committee today? If none, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, thank you, Gary. Second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, I'll go across the screens. Jen Carberg,
Aye.
Graham Durovich,
Aye.
Gary Beller,
Aye.
Sarah Boyce,
Aye.
Chris McClure,
Aye.
Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you all. See you in a month or sooner.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Gary.
Thank you.
Wear a mask and stay safe.
Thank you, Gary.